Lesson 108. In this lesson, we learn another word from the second declension, and that is kibbutz. If you're using ecclesiastical pronunciation, this word will sound like chibus. Let's jump right into our exercises. In number 1, portamos is the verb. That means we are carrying or we carry, and kibbum is the accusative singular form of kibbutz. So number 1 will say, we are carrying food. In number 2, the word said divides the sentence into 2 clauses. In the first clause, the verb is habeyo, which means I have, and kibbum is the direct object. In the second clause, habeyo is the verb, and it's being negated by non, and aquam is the direct object. So number 2 says, I have food, but I do not have water. In number 3, porto is the verb, and there are 2 direct objects, kibbum and aquamque. The que ending on aquamque is like putting the word and between kibbum and aquam. So number 3 says, I am carrying food and water. In number 4, there are 2 clauses, one before the word quod and one after. In the first one, portant is the verb, that means they carry or they are carrying. Weary is the subject, and there are 2 direct objects, kibbum and aquamque. In the second clause, ambulant is the verb, that means they walk or they are walking, and ad silvam is a prepositional phrase. So number 4 will say, the men are carrying food and water because they are walking to the forest. In number 5, there are 2 clauses, one before the word quod and one after. In the first clause, dant is the verb. That means they give or they are giving, but we don't need the word they because femini is the subject. Kibbum is the direct object, and poetai is the dative singular form of poeta. That's the indirect object. So the first clause will say, the women are giving food to the poet. In the second clause, habet is the verb. That means he, she, or it has, and there's no other word in this clause to be the subject. By looking at the context of the sentence, we can tell that this second clause is talking about the poet that was receiving food in the first clause. So we'll use he as the subject of this clause. Non is negating habet, and kibbum is the direct object. So number 5 will say, the women are giving food to the poet because he does not have food. In number 6, habent is the verb. That means they have, but we don't need they because nautai is the subject. Kibbum is the direct object, and non is negating the verb. So number 6 will say, the sailors do not have food. In number 7, delent is the verb. That means they are destroying or they destroy, but we don't need they because weary is the subject. Insularum is a genitive plural possessing weary. Scaphos is the direct object, and nautarum is a genitive plural that's possessing scaphos. So number 7 will say, the men of the islands are destroying the boats of the sailors, or the men of the islands are destroying the sailors' boats. In number 8, we have 2 clauses, one before quod and one after quod. The first one says, we are building a wall. In the second one, desideramus is the verb, and that means we want or we long for. Patriam is the direct object, and servare is an infinitive that means to guard. So number 8 will say, we are building a wall because we want to guard the homeland. In number 9, dot is the verb. That means he, she, or it gives, or he, she, or it is giving, but we don't need he, she, or it because regina is the subject. Weeris is the indirect object. That's the dative plural form of weir. Silwai is a genitive singular that's possessing weeris. Pecuniam is the direct object, and semper is an adverb. So number 9 will say, the queen always gives money to the men of the forest. In number 10, desiderant is the verb. That means they long for or they want, but we don't need the word they because bestiae is the subject. Silwai is a genitive singular that's possessing bestiae. Kibbum is the direct object. So number 10 will say, the beasts of the forest want food.